Brothers and sisters in Christ, good evening. Christ is in our midst. Before we begin our meeting this evening, why don't we begin with a short prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O heavenly King, Comforter, the Spirit of truth, present everywhere and filling all things, the treasury of good and the giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us from our sins and save our souls, O good one. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I know that everyone is quite busy as people are getting their kids off to school and trying to maybe even come back from any mini vacations that you were able to take some time off. I want to thank you all for joining us. And tonight's meeting is to introduce everyone to a new Metropolis initiative, as we're calling it, Strengthen Stewardship Now. It's an initiative that we started at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. You'll hear a little bit more about it from the various subcommittee chairs and also the co-chairs of this initiative. I'd like to introduce those individuals, and you'll get to see them shortly on your screen. We have Owen Field from St. George, who's on the Parish Council, the Vice President of the Parish, Stewardship Committee member, and is also one of the co-chairs of our Strengthen Stewardship Now program. Myra Karagiannis, also from St. George, is also a co-chair of the program. Lou Laros from Hierarchs in Champaign. He serves on the parish's stewardship committee as the chairperson. Deanna Kolas from St. Mary's, Minneapolis, who's also serving on our Metropolis Junior Board. Dimitris Katsamberis from St. Demetrios, Elmhurst. Dimitris is also serving us in the Metropolis as part of the Metropolis Strategic Planning Task Force that is looking at stewardship. And last but not least, Deacon Paul Kalina, who is one of our many deacons in the Metropolis, and he serves over in St. Mary's in Minneapolis. This evening, you'll hear what is an introduction to the program. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. You will not be able to ask your questions anonymously. We think it's important for us to understand not only who's asking the questions, but also to understand the dynamics of your parish. So we have not permitted the feature of anonymous questions. We encourage you to ask a question. There is no right or wrong question to ask. We will do our best to answer them by the end of this evening. At some point, we will provide you all a detailed understanding and a report and slides on the Metropolis website, where you will be able to access what you'll hear tonight in summary form, and you'll be able to look at it more in detail. You'll also have various resources and tools that you can utilize for your own parish's stewardship program. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Myra Karagiannis.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I am not Myra, but sometimes I resemble her. We will try to keep this evening's presentation relatively short so that there will be sufficient time for questions and answers. First, what is stewardship? What does stewardship look like at a parish level? Pat was one of the committee members. We spent many hours in many meetings with her, and she told this story one day, and we thought it was important as an example of what stewardship can mean. When she was a new bride, she moved to Milwaukee. She had no connection to Milwaukee other than her new husband. and she went to Annunciation. And the priest at Annunciation at the time had just started a new program where small groups of parishioners would meet in each other's homes, and the priest was there as well. And they would get to know the priest on a personal level. The priest would get to know his parishioners on a personal level. They talked about life. They talked about the parish. They talked about their faith. And she was made to feel welcome and a part of that parish. And she will emphasize during those meetings, she was never asked for money. But because she was welcomed, because she was allowed to participate, she became generous toward the parish because she felt the parish had been generous toward her, and it became her family. Why stewardship and why now? His Eminence gave you a bit of a summary on that, and it's a familiar story to all of us. The Strategic Planning Task Force started in January. It has several components, one of which was stewardship. But then March came along, it brought the pandemic. That changed things dramatically for every parish. One of the things that happened, or that we knew would happen, is that our summer festivals were canceled. We don't know when other events where people congregate, such as galas, smokers, etc., are going to be able to happen again, other than possibly virtually. So it brought to mind something that many of us had thought for years, that some of our parishes are too dependent upon such events to keep the lights on. Instead, we should be looking toward stewardship to be making up any possible declining revenue. Knowing that, His Eminence did create the Strengthen Stewardship Now Committee. It's 22 individuals from 14 parishes, and a wonderfully diverse group of people. There are young adults and formerly young adults. There are clergy, there are lay, there are people from large parishes, small parishes, medium parishes, from Minneapolis to South Bend, Milwaukee to Town and Country. The 22 of us met for many, many hours over the summer. I counted for 1 month 32 scheduled Zoom calls, which means over 4 months it was over 50 or more. And all of us met, became friends, and learned a great deal. And this is one of the most important things about this project. It is coming to the parishes from the parishes. No consultants, people who have lived and watched and worked with stewardship at the parish level, sharing ideas. They all took ownership of this product and are proud of it. They all were engaged every day of the summer, and they were extremely generous with their time and talent. And with that, I will turn it over to Myra.
Thank you, Owen, and thank you, Your Eminence. As Owen mentioned, it was quite an intense summer with regard to all of the meetings and the commitment of all of the committee members. And I want to really, really thank all of their committee members for their time and commitment and their ideas. So let's talk a little bit about stewardship. So stewardship is really a life cycle. It is not just money. Owen mentioned ownership. We talk about engagement with the first slide, and generosity. What is ownership? Ownership really means that the leadership of the church develops a program, promotes the program, is enthusiastic about the program, and stands behind the program. And that ownership includes any number of components, including things such as being transparent, such as having accurate accounting, such as having a stewardship committee that can be diverse and bring ideas to the table, and not be afraid to innovate and not be afraid to change. So ownership is key, and without the leadership support, there can't be much of a stewardship overall. And engagement. This is the pinnacle of stewardship of the church. We saw the Owen statement with regard to Pat and how engaged she became at her church and became a lifelong committed steward, became a caretaker, which is what stewards are. Stewards are caretakers. Now, how do you go about engaging people? It's not really very difficult, but you do have to make the effort, and you have to go out of your way to make sure that you welcome everybody. So when somebody walks into the parish, don't stand behind the pagadi and be a sales clerk. Be in front, welcome, say hello, invite people to coffee hour, introduce them to other members of the parish. Get to know them, get to know their strengths. What is it that they like to do? You know, are they talented in IT? Perhaps you have a need in that area. Are they talented in putting programs together? Perhaps you have a need in that area. Whatever it is, get to know your parishioners, engage them, and then once you engage them, please let them do and do not micromanage. So, and then always acknowledge and celebrate. Generosity. Generosity, you know, you may be surprised, but it can actually be taught. And I know I've read a lot of studies, and I'm sure you have as well. You know that generous people, and studies tell us, are happy people. And frankly, I don't even think we really need to talk about studies. I mean, I personally do not know any stingy people who are happy. I don't know about you. So generosity can be taught to adults and children. You can also promote generosity by giving your parishioners an opportunity to do as much as they can, and base percentage of income giving. A generous parish also equals generous parishioners. The parish itself should be generous and have a philanthropic aspect to its ministries as a parish. Let us tell you a little bit about St. George. So just as recently as 2014, St. George was still in a dues system. And it was comfortable. People knew what to expect. They knew what they were going to give. And it was, you know, just the way of life. It had been that way for many, many years. And so it went. Everybody got a letter at the beginning of the year. Everybody rushed in to write their check and to turn it in. So when discussions started about moving away from dues into a different type of system where it's free will or give according to your means, there was not surprisingly a pushback. And there was also skepticism. Are people going to give as much as the dues? And nevertheless, with the help of the parish priest, the stewardship committee was formed, and then the stewardship committee developed a program, and it was explained to the parish council, and stewardship became part and parcel a year-long process. And it wasn't just a one-day event or one letter or one Stewardship Sunday, but rather, the Stewardship Committee hosted coffee hours. They sponsored Godparents Sunday, and also met at home and had mimosas and brunch, and that's how their meetings were held. So there was enthusiasm. What was the result? Just within a few years, the stewardship giving increased by 400%, which also gave the parish the opportunity to do a bit more philanthropic work in the community. So what is parish stewardship? It really just comes down to three things. Emotional connection. You have to have an emotional connection between your parish and the parishioners. You have to provide opportunities for parishioners to get involved, and you have to let them get involved. How often have all of us heard people say, oh, there's only 2 or 3 people that work. No, it's always the same people that, do this, that, or the other thing. And then somebody comes up and says, hey, can I help? And the response is, oh, that's covered. And so let's engage people and promote generosity on a percentage of income giving. How to strengthen? I think we've talked about all of these things. Ownership, reach out, provide user-friendly tools so people can get online and donate. Eliminate barriers to giving, ensure accounting is accurate, financial priority, transparency, philanthropy on the part of the parish, generosity, communicate and always celebrate and acknowledge. As Owen mentioned, we spent several months working on materials and putting together an entire program with the entire 22 members of our committee. So there will be resources for you that His Eminence mentioned are going to be on the web we don't know exactly when, but they will be on the web relatively soon. In addition to that, there is also an outreach component and we will be reaching out to the parishes to see whether or not we can be of assistance, and whether or not the parishes would like the assistance, to come up with ideas so that a particular program in your particular parish can be strengthened. And in addition to that, there will be monthly Metropolis-wide stewardship meetings. And the first meeting is scheduled for September 1, 2020. That's just next week. This is a first, where it's Metropolis-wide for the purpose of exchanging ideas, learning from one another. And so now we heard from Pat. Let's hear from a young adult, Billy Tabrizi, for today and for the future.
One of the reasons I'm so connected to our faith is parish leaders who have reached out over the years with a simple question: can we have your help? Whether it was serving on the altar as a young parishioner at St. Geralambos, or as a college student when the leaders at 3 Hierarchs in Champaign asked if I could be a Sunday school teacher. Or now at St. George in Chicago, where the Stewardship Committee reached out and asked for help with online payments. Parish leaders have always been willing to say, we could use your help. And that ask has drawn me closer to our church, the parish, and my faith. And so talking to you all today, my hope is that as you think about some of the things your parish hopes to accomplish, that you'll consider reaching out to a young adult and saying, would you be able to help us?
So the key takeaways from all of this are very, very simple. We started with Pat Owen describing her experiences, and ended with Billy Tabrizi, the young person of today, saying just reach out. So engagement is key. Number 2, don't be afraid to change. Number 3, we are here and we will be able to assist. And we develop materials as we stated, as well as the meetings, as well as reaching out personally to be of assistance. And with that, I will turn it over to His Eminence.
Thank you, Myra and Owen, for giving us the overview of our Strengthen Stewardship Now. As you heard, we are continuing to develop a long-term strategic planning goal for stewardship. That task force is continuing to work. In the meantime, we are implementing this program. We will learn from this program, and it will help inform the long-term vision for stewardship for our metropolis. At this point, I would like to ask everyone to consider writing in your questions. I will be asking the questions and directing them. If you can please consider directing your question to any of the participants. That would help us, get you a better informed answer. Otherwise, I'll do my best to do that myself. We have a question from Father Michael Kostandinidis, who says, "You said that the stewardship committee should be diverse. What do you mean by that?" Does anyone want to take that? Maybe
I can
let me
certainly-
see. Yeah. Okay, Myra.
Yeah, I can certainly take that. By diverse, we mean all ages, the young, the not so young, the young adults, men, women, Greeks, non-Greeks, converts, so that you can have an influx of ideas and bring everybody together. That's what we mean by diverse.
And Myra, I don't know if from any of the panelists' experience, I mean, we have parishioners or people who attend our churches, whether they're fiancés or spouses of Orthodox Christians who are not yet Orthodox. I don't think that it's out of the question to even ask those who are still searching for Orthodoxy or considering Orthodoxy to be part of the life of a parish, and to consider even serving on the stewardship committee. So being diverse on that level as well, because they are members of our community.
Absolutely, and that when we have certainly incorporated that within our church.
Thank you. Let me see. All the papadas are writing questions. If the laity want to write, they can write questions as well. Let me just, Father Sotiri Malamis, he says, thank you for the wonderful presentation, as well as the hard work and time put in for this very informative meeting. Several parishioners, especially new parishioners, want to know what financial commitment is expected. What is wrong with setting an amount or setting an average amount when doing stewardship or introducing a stewardship program? Let me see, maybe Owen, do you want to take that?
I thank you, Your Eminence. I always hate to use the word wrong, but there are certainly preferred or best practices. Though people want to know what is expected, if you have dues or even more, basically the same thing, though slightly more subtle, a recommended amount, the individual, the parishioner, is not determining what the church means to him or her. It's letting someone else determine. It doesn't take into account one's ability to pay. It is, in effect, paying dues to a country club or to your gym. But to me, the most important thing about why we need to get away from dues or recommended amounts or even talking about averages is that it sends a very somewhat subtle message, which is the parish has determined what the church is worth to you, not you determining what the church is worth to yourself. Someone else is dictating it, and if the amount is low, that's an indication of what the parish thinks of itself. Get away, its ability to pay based on a percentage of one's income, and it's determined on an individual basis.
Thank you, Owen. Father Dustin Lyon says, I can't get volunteers in my parish, or when I do, there are more, well, I guess this is more of a hypothetical. Can I get volunteers in my parish, or when I do, they are more of an obstacle than help? What can be done in such a situation? Who would like to take that? Owen, you want to try that since you've been at this for a while?
That's probably one of the most difficult questions, and certainly that is a situation or a circumstance that there cannot be any cookie cutter approach. This is precisely the kind of thing that we're hoping to get at when we do our parish outreach. Deacon Paul or someone else on his subcommittee will be calling each parish and asking to set up meetings. And one of the things, the first meeting will be a listening session on our part. And this is the kind of thing we want to hear so that we can reflect and have a response, or at least some suggestions that seem to fit more with the parish on a personal basis.
And Owen,
thank you. Yeah, Deanna, go ahead.
If I can just add, I think this kind of relates to something that my committee members and I talked about on our engagement committee. Again, like Owen said, it's difficult to answer specifically without knowing the parish and the specific concerns, but a couple ideas that came to mind when I heard that question was, one, like Myra highlighted in her presentation, reaching out individually to people is a really often more effective way to get participants. Instead of saying, here's a link, sign up. If you reach out to people by text or call, that can help people be more willing to volunteer. And then also taking the time to train them, teach them how to volunteer, right, to kind of get past that. When we do get volunteers, they're causing more harm than good in some ways. But if you're willing to really invest, teach them, hear their ideas, be willing to maybe meet them part way if they have ideas as well, like Myra said, to be willing to change in some ways, those are a couple ideas that came to mind.
So, Deanna, thank you for that, because we had a question from Anthony Kroll who says, what are ways that a stewardship committee can appreciate parishioners' participation, both via talent and via treasure? So your response about engaging and listening and being open to ideas, I think is quite important. Did you want to add anything to that specific, kind of the question of how do you show the appreciation of your parishioners' talents and treasure?
I think this might be a question for Dimitri. I know that was something they discussed, but some of the things we discussed in our committee with that were things like celebration luncheons. I know that's something we do at St. Mary's, is have just appreciation dinners and events for parishioners, thanking multiple ways, again, text, email, cards, saying thank you a lot of times when anyone does volunteer or give, just to really make sure that they know they're appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Dimitri, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, Your Eminence. One thought perhaps here can be that people can meet after church. Small groups can be personally invited to have a kind of a coffee hour on their own, and in a smaller setting of maybe 8, 10, 12 people max. Some people from the parish council, if the clergy also has some time, they can have a free discussion about maybe how things are going with the church, what they would like to see better, how things can be improved, any recommendations, any ideas about the future. So that's another way to do it, to invite people, afterwards to meet more in a more intimate setting in the church.
Thank you, Dimitri. There's a few questions that we received. I think they're related to they saw the slide or the mention of percentage of giving, and I want to kind of group those together if I can. So there's two questions. One coming from, let me find that. So there's a question from Lou Kafkis and also from Father Panagiotis Hasiakos. I'll read both of them. Hi, this is Lou from Kafkis from Holy Apostles in Westchester, Illinois. We have been on a stewardship system for years, but I have a question, and he says for Myra, but we'll open it up to whomever at this point. But Myra, you can take first stab at it. Have you actually set a percentage of income target for stewardship giving within your parish, or is that an aspirational goal? If yes, what is that percentage? So I think Lou is asking, what is St. George doing with regard to percentage of giving? Has that begun at St. George? And then let me also read that next question related to percentage of giving. The idea of that. Father Hasiakos, I believe, where is it? It says, no, I'm sorry, it was not Father Hasiakos. It was, where is it? Father Panagiotis Basnos. I saw on a slide something about percentage of income giving. Can you elaborate more about that? So Myra, why don't you answer the question about, Myra and Owen, since you're both from St. George, what is happening at St. George? Is this an aspirational goal, or have you begun putting that into practice there in St. George?
At St. George, during the past few years, we started essentially with give according to your means, and have also transitioned somewhat to asking people to give according to their means, but also increase. We have not at this point adopted give a percentage of your income. We do believe that, and I think the other question was, what is percentage of the income? Percentage of the income just really means you look at what your income is and you give 1%, 2%, 3%, and this is based on the whole notion that all of us have different financial resources. To ask a retiree who lives on Social Security to give either dues or an average amount, and to ask the person who is making in excess of 6 figures and some in excess of 7 figures to do the same thing just is not exactly, it doesn't help to support the church and make stewards be caretakers of the church. And if we all give that which we can, because as Owen said, based on our ability and where we are, as opposed to some preconceived notion of what it should be. So based on income, I mean, we all know the word tithing. The Bible talks about 10% in terms of tithing. I don't believe that, this committee talked specifically about tithing per se and saying 10%. But a chart that shows income and percentages, and St. Basil is a church that has actually incorporated that and has been successful, from what I understand, in doing that. And I believe that there are other churches as well.
So that's St. Basil in Chicago?
Yes.
And so one of the resources that will be available to everyone is a chart that I believe is based on the chart that was developed at St. Basil. The Metropolis is not by any sense saying that everyone must give a specific percentage of their income, but the aspirational goal, the thing for us to strive is to get, for sure, our people to understand that we should be planning in advance every year what we're prepared to give to our community before we buy a raffle ticket, before we buy a souvlaki, before we buy any ticket to any event, before we even, buy a candle, purchase a candle, to sit down with your family and pray over what it is that you are prepared to give. And we say percentage of your income because it's a way for you to organize your budget. So as you look at your budgets, make sure that your parish is included in your household budget, and do so intentionally in the beginning of the year. Let me just see what other questions we have here. There's several that have come in. Again, related to how people are giving and supporting or becoming stewards of their parish. We have Peter Metru who says, taking into consideration an income-based stewardship, how do we handle those who only donate to perform a sacrament, i.e. a wedding, baptism, etc.? I mean, I want to answer that if possible, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Because I think that I don't know any parish, at least in our metropolis. I know there are still a few out there perhaps in our metropolis and around the archdiocese nationwide, where stewardship is based on, a sacrament. You're not a steward for that year unless you're baptizing a child, or you want to become a kumbaro at a wedding, or you're getting married. And that's when people remember to become stewards. Quite frankly, I think the best way for us to teach people to get away from that system is not to accept stewardship at that point. It's not a transactional. Stewardship should not be transactional. So if we have parishes that have that system where you can't get married unless you're a steward, we should not do that. We should, encourage people to sign up. If there are fees for sacraments because of the facility fee and so forth, that's one thing. But we really should avoid accepting people to becoming stewards of our church for sacraments. If we can do that, if the parishes initiate that change, then we can hopefully, re-engage those people after the sacrament and say, look, let's sit down now and talk. You just baptized your child. You just got married. You just became a kumbaro. How can we get you involved in the life of the church? We want to see your family now. So don't make it about getting their stewardship for that sacrament. Come back to them and talk about how they can become more engaged after the sacrament is over, afterwards. So that's my recommendation. I don't know if others have other recommendations in your own experiences at your parishes. Lou, do you have anything to offer? Did you ever have that? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, the fact that we are kind of secluded, we really don't have that issue where true church shopping can take place and all that. So what we try and do is when we're discussing the sacrament, Father will help introduce the concept of getting them set up on the computer and discuss stewardship. And then we go through our stewardship program with them. And what we find for the most part, people are relatively generous. So again, the fact that we're 125 miles away from Chicago, it kind of protects us. And I think that the closest parish is about 50 miles away. So you won't have per se people saying, well, the three hierarchs are going to make us abide by stewardship. We're going to go somewhere else. And like I said, what we try and do is introduce the concept, work them through it, get them all signed up. And then prior to the actual sacrament, make sure that there are members in good standing, not only financially, but first and foremost religiously.
So, because you mentioned you said you're isolated in Champaign?
Well, we're a beacon of orthodoxy in a cornfield, all right?
So we have several, the communities that are closer to the Chicagoland area are obviously much closer to one another, and they influence each other, they learn from one another. But we do have several parishes that are several hundred miles away from the neighboring parish, or at least dozens of miles away from a neighboring parish. And we have a question from Nicholas Nopoulos from St. George in Des Moines, which is pretty far away from downtown Chicago. So Nicholas says, his question is, committed versus non-committed stewards is the topic. In an ideal world, 100% committed would be great if all the parishioners are stewards. What percentages are typically seen to help set a baseline and create action plans around? So basically, I think the question, if I'm not mistaken, is related to how many active and engaged stewards do you need before you can actually, have an action plan for something. I'm assuming or create action plans in the plural for growing the community or introducing programs in a community. So, I mean, that could be open to all of the panelists. What have you seen? I mean, how many what's the kind of, what do you need in order to be able to move forward? What percentage of your parishioners? What have you all seen? Owen, Myra, Lou, Dimitri?
Your Eminence, I can speak to that a little bit from my experience in Arizona. And my experience in Arizona was that it was a small mission parish, and they had 3 prior failed building campaigns. And what we realized is that in order to move the church forward, we had to engage each and every person who was within that community. And it wasn't a matter of setting minimums. It wasn't a matter of determining what their income was or what they could give or what they couldn't give. It was involving each and every person in the church and the life of the church. And it was realizing that each and every one of those persons was a soul and a human person. And that, it's difficult because I understand it from both sides as being a lay person and also being a clergy, is that as a clergy, you get caught up in so many different things. You get dragged in so many different directions and so many different meetings. But ultimately, the reason that each and every one of the priests went into the priesthood is to help each and every person gain eternal salvation. And when we were in that parish, we started small. It didn't matter what people had. We had certain times where we couldn't pay the priest, and the priest had to defer his salary to the next month. But we continued to offer the services. We continued to offer the sacraments. We continued to live the life of the church in whatever way that we possibly could. And little by little, we started to grow. And little by little, people started to give. And we were able to pay our bills. And finally, we got to the point where we felt that even though we had 100 families, it was time to move forward with building a church and move from the little house that we were in. And we brought down a fundraiser, and the fundraiser looked at our statistics and he looked at our numbers and he said, there's no way you're going to build this church. You need to continue to grow your parish. You're only going to be able to raise probably $200,000. You're not at the point where you can start building. We disagreed with that, and we decided to move forward, and we had 100 families, and we reached out to people, and we went into homes, and we talked to people, and we found out what their questions were with the church, where they saw the church in their life, where they saw the church with their family. And we did little home meetings, And then we decided to proceed with our building project. And as was mentioned, we tried to be as transparent as possible with the finances, with where we were, what we were going to spend, what the campaign was going to cost us. And what I learned from that process, and I'm very guilty of it, and I confess to all of you and ask your forgiveness, is that when I look at people, I look at them, and right away I judge them. I look at how they're dressed, I look at what they say, I try to determine what their income is and what they could give. And I was very guilty of that on the parish council and on the building campaign. And what I realized is that the people that I thought were the people who were going to give the most to the campaign were the people who didn't give. And the people that I thought would probably not be able to give much were the people who came forward and gave the most. They did all sorts of things. They took second mortgages on their homes. They took old jewelry that they had and they offered that to the church to sell. There were older folks who had stocks and they were sitting on stocks and they decided that they wanted to give the stocks to the church so that they could build a new church and have that be part of the legacy. And I think throughout all of that process, it made me realize that we don't know how God is going to provide. We don't know where he's going to act, where the Holy Spirit is going to guide people. We were able to raise $1.1 million from 100 families, where the campaign person thought we would raise 200, maybe 300. We were able to build that church. We were able to get the mortgage. We were able to eventually pay off that mortgage. We limit ourselves too much. And it isn't a matter of whether someone wants to sign a stewardship card or doesn't want to sign a stewardship card. They have their reasons, whether they want to or not. They're still a human being, and whether they want to sign that card or not, I think it's important to understand where they're coming from and to meet them and try to understand why they don't want to sign the card, why they do want to sign the card. And I think we have to look at them as people. And the thing that I come back to all the time is that we are one body, and Christ has asked us to be one body with him as the head and us being connected. You know, the issues of COVID aren't going away. They're here. They're going to persist. And if the church is what we want the church to be, and we want to leave it in the hands of the young people so that it continues and strengthens and educates people, we need to listen, we need to engage. And we can talk about money, but ultimately what we need to talk about are lives, and we need to talk about eternal salvation, and we need to keep Jesus Christ in the forefront of all of this. And we all have our attachments. I have my attachments. There are things that I will gladly let go of, but if you want to take the last chocolate chip cookie from me, I'm going to fight you over it. You know, we all have these things, and we have to realize that. We have to get past those things. We can do so many things if we allow the Holy Spirit to work through us, but we also limit ourselves on the human level. You know, I have a wonderful example that in the town meetings, when I speak to each and every one of your parishes, if I get to that point, I'll relate to you, but I don't want to take any more time. I think I've spoken enough already, and you know, I know there's other questions that need to be answered.
Deacon, so I think you helped answer some questions about engagement that have been coming in, but just a question. I mean, in your experience when you were trying, the parish in Arizona was working on that capital campaign. It's a special kind of project. Would you say you had 100% participation in that on one level or another?
I wouldn't say 100% participation, but what we had is we had participation on different levels from different people. and people came forward and gave a little bit. There were those people who were suspicious of us, that we were doing a fourth building campaign and that it was going to fail. So they had their reservations and they held back any kind of contribution. Later on, once they saw that the church was going to be built, then they came readily forward. There were other people who, as I mentioned, older people who had income, who decided that this is where they wanted their legacy to be. They didn't know where else that they wanted to give their money. They wanted it to be used for the church. They trusted us with the money, that it would be used to build the church. You know, there were people on so many different levels. There were children who came forward who just donated, you know, a few dollars. They connected.
But Deacon, did you, in terms of beyond the money, did you have an engaged community there that was active?
Absolutely. We did not move forward with the building of the church until we involved the community. And it was involving the community across all levels. It was a smaller parish, so there weren't people who could hide from what needed to be done. But also we learned that the best way to engage people, and Father Dustin said that with volunteers, the best way to engage people is to identify people. Identify people and learn to get to know people, get to know what their skill set is, get to know if there are people who are technologically savvy, get to know if there are people who are great at putting together marketing materials. If you know them and you kind of know what they do, then making a personal outreach to them, most people are not going to come forward if you just say, we need volunteers for something. The people that you will find, or that we found, and I find in Minneapolis, that are most productive are those people that you go up to and say, you know what, you really have something that can be very beneficial to the church. We need your help. And by doing that, people really feel empowered. They feel energy. They feel that they want to do something for the church. And when we did that with the community, we were able to strengthen the community. We were able to energize the community. And once we did that, then the issue of what people gave and what stewardship from a monetary standpoint, that just started to grow. As people became involved in the church and became part of the church and got to know one another and participated in the service, they were very willing to participate in giving to events and in giving to the budget and all of these things. I think too many times we just focus on money and people get tired of hearing about money. If we focus on people and in activity and engagement in the parish and involving them and understanding the issues with their families, they will gladly come forward to support the church. But if the church is just there and no one's talking to them at coffee hour and they're walking in and walking out and they don't have any connection for anything that we do in our lives and that we're associated with, people aren't going to support it. And you know, people come forward. I mean, Greeks especially are the most generous people I have ever seen. If there is a need, they come forward. And if we engage all of our parishioners, Greek, Russian, Romanian, Ethiopian, you know, people who are seeking, they will come forward and support all of the ministries that we have. But it takes work, it takes energy, it takes zeal. And you know, it's difficult. But this is what Christ has asked us to do. And in the world in which we live today, we need to continue working even harder to reach all of those souls who are lost and wandering right now.
So thank you, Deacon. We have a couple of questions related to, I guess, transparency or accountability. Let me just see. There is a question that just came in from Joyce Mufoletto, who says, this is not a question, but we have found that whenever we have a project that needs funds, we have found that if we are transparent and if people understand where we are along the way, we are able to move forward with enthusiasm. We were able to raise the money to pay for a new HVAC program in about 6 weeks, but we brought the community along the way. And when there is a need like the fires in Greece, we are able to raise money because people understand and have a heart. And along those same lines, there was a question about, let me find it. So from Father Basil Hickman, what does financial transparency mean? What is necessary for us to actually be transparent? Lou, do you want to maybe take that question?
Sure. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Speak to transparency.
Yes, thank you, Your Eminence. We're really true believers of trying to be as transparent as possible. And exactly, when the parishioners are in lockstep with the parish and the parish council on knowing exactly what the needs are, that is extremely helpful, and we probably have a lot more success. The other aspect of this is to make sure with any stewardship program that you have the proper software that will allow you from an accounting standpoint to make sure that you get information to each parishioner in a timely manner as possible. Quarterly statements are almost essential. And what I would even say towards the end of the year, I think people really need to know where they're at. So increasing the amount of transparency by giving them knowledge of results of where they are, where their commitment is at certain time of the year is extremely helpful. I don't think anyone actively tries not to fulfill their obligation whenever they end up turning in a stewardship commitment form. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times parishes get away from staying on top of it enough, and if we're not there giving them quarterly reminders, at the end of the day, they will fall behind, and so will the church. The other thing is, from a transparent standpoint of getting all your stewardship pledges in as quickly as possible, giving everyone knowledge of where they stand with the parish, not from a financial standpoint, but whether they've turned in their financial commitments to the church is also very important. So I would highly recommend getting a software program that allows you to not only send out letters to make sure people fulfill their commitments, but also via emails, which are even more timely. So basically, that's what we're looking for from a transparency standpoint.
Okay. We have a couple of questions related to the kind of resources or assistance that the Metropolis will be providing. Father Chris Michalopoulos says, what assistance can we really expect from the Metropolis in making these changes, in transitioning into more stewardship? And I think there was one more. Konstantinos Katsamberis says, can you go into more detail about the new types of resources that will be available? Please also elaborate on what barriers of giving examples are. And let me just see. Yeah, so those two, I mean, Deacon, I think you are going to be part of the subcommittee that's reaching out to parishes to assist them with implementing, stewardship programs. But I did want to say that the Metropolis, as you saw in one of the slides, is going to be hosting almost monthly meetings with key people from the Archdiocese, from the stewardship department, evangelism and outreach departments, and you will be all invited to those. And you can go into more specific details and sub-themes of stewardship more in detail on those monthly calls. We also have the opportunity that was given to us through the Renaissance Foundation that is offering, I believe, up to 30 participants across the metropolis to be trained through a special program of the University of Indiana, I believe it was, in kind of nonprofit management and fundraising. So those resources will be offered to you through the metropolis. But Deacon Paul, anything that you wanted to kind of speak to in terms of what your committee will be doing and helping with?
Yes, Your Eminence. The first part of, of what we're looking at doing is basically a listening session. It's along the lines of the listening town hall sessions that you had when you were first made Metropolitan. And what we want to do is we want to go to the parishes, and I've contacted some of the fathers already and spoken with them about setting up such a listening session. And we want to do that with the other parishes. The purpose for that is to listen to where each parish is, realizing that each parish is different. And this program that we're doing is not something that's mandated by the metropolis, but what it is a way to reach out, to provide assistance, to provide guidance, to realize that we care. Those people who are on the committee, is Eminence, those who are all involved in this, is that we care about all of these parishes and where they're at. And the listening session is something that can be done with the priest and the stewardship chairman, the parish council. It can be done with the whole parish. But it's a way of us trying to understand where past stewardship programs have been, what the successes have been, what the failures have been, where the current stewardship program is, and then kind of what the future plans are that the parish foresees. And in that way, trying to gather that information, besides what was submitted in the surveys, we can then go back and suggest ways in which stewardship can be strengthened. We can perhaps, if the parish wants to, put them in contact with other parishes, with other stewardship people, and provide resources in that way, whether it's printed resources or just speaking with people or programs that have been successful in different communities. And again, we realize that small parishes are different from medium versus large parishes, but trying to understand what each and every parish, their need is, and then trying to respond to that to help them in whatever way we can. So that's something that we're starting now. There's about 15 parishes so far that I've contacted. My subcommittee, we've divided up for 2 people, sometimes 3 people for each parish. And then the priests that I've contacted who have said, yes, absolutely, you can contact us. Then the people on my subcommittee will contact the priest and organize probably a Zoom, but it could be in person or whatever the parish is comfortable with.
So thank you, Deacon. We have, I'm going to take 3 more questions. Maybe Deanna, there's a question that maybe you can help answer in terms of, it says, you mentioned, it was mentioned that engagement is an important part of stewardship. Could you give us ideas on how we can engage our parishioners given all the limitations that we are facing with COVID-19? So how do you engage parishioners? How do you help them feel like they're part of a family given that we're still limited in terms of what we can do in person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think in general, whether it's before COVID, during, or after, it's important to pay attention to and address what the parishioners' needs are, as well as what they're wanting. And if the church is able to fulfill some of those needs, that's really going to draw people in. So that's kind of a general answer. And then specific things that I've heard from parishes and that we've talked about in our committee. I know at St. Mary's, we had people making personal phone calls to the elderly or just people in the community to see what they were needing, seeing if there's any logistic support we can provide, surveys to the parishioners about how are you feeling comfortable coming to church? Is there anything different we can do as far as our safety protocols? Sending out, I know IOCC sent messages and surveys to volunteers to see what are the needs of your parishes. They were planning, I don't know if it's happened yet or if it will, but mental health seminars, kind of giving out tips and providing spiritual guidance on ways to cope with this, you know, engaging people that way. I know, again, at St. Mary's, they had daily vitamins that they were sending out once a day, especially when COVID had first started. So spiritual reflections, again, just giving the parishioners something that they needed. And then as far as events, you know, trying to continue all of the already existing ministries virtually or outdoors in whatever way. I know another parish did a virtual parish coffee hour, you know, where the parishioners just hopped on Zoom and chatted with each other. So I would say just getting creative about ways to do things virtually or outdoors, continuing some of the ministries, and then also just offering them things, you know, that they need amongst all of this too. So again, a couple of specific ideas, but again, it would depend on the parish.
So I think that this speaks to the importance of having people engaged on those monthly calls, because these meetings, these calls and monthly meetings will include parishioners and representatives from all of our parishes. So you will be able to get ideas and share your ideas as well from each other and with each other. So please, you know, make sure that you get on those calls, because I think, especially we did this with the clergy, when we share best practices or ideas, where one priest comes up with an innovative way of engaging his parishioners, could be easily or should be theoretically easily implemented in another parish as well. So please do make sure that you get on those calls. If you can't participate, please have a representative from your parish participate so that you can learn from each other. Someone asked about...
One quick thing is that I just want to state that also being a physician, the issue of COVID isn't going to go away. So we can't wait to think that it's going to go away and not be an issue for us. So I think we need to be creative. We need to reach out to people. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of unbelievable clergy with unbelievable ideas. There's no harm in duplicating. We don't need to come up with original things. If somebody has found something that is successful and engaging to their parish, we should all copy it. We don't need to be creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Deacon. We all need to be creative, but we all need to share as well our creativity so that we're not potentially missing something from one parish to parish. One person asked about software. I know that that's probably going to be covered by the monthly calls, but you know, what software is everyone using at their parishes for kind of keeping track of people's time and talents and giving? Owen and Myra, what does St. George use? You're muted, I think, Myra.
I personally am not completely familiar with the software that St. George is using. We have emphasized time and time again, and we are getting quite good at sending out thank you letters and being prompt and keeping in touch with people. But I think Lou had a specific program that he found extremely helpful. So maybe Lou can speak to that a little bit better.
Before Lou jumps in,
Sure,
I just received information that St. George uses PDS, Parish, what is it, Parish Data Systems. Yes.
Okay. Lou, how about you? What do you use over in Champaign?
The three hierarchs, if you remember, Your Eminence, it was at the Boston Clergy Laity. It's ACS, supported by the Archdiocese, and we've had a lot of success with this program, not only from the standpoint of giving us a more accurate depiction of stewardship, but also the support that you receive. We're almost on weekly conference calls with Effie Marie Smith from the Archdiocese, and it's been extremely helpful. And they're very willing to walk you through any type of problem and set up different reports and different ways to get out to your parishioners. So it's ACS technology.
Okay. Again, that's something that I'm sure the monthly meetings will address. It'll definitely be something that will be covered. I wanted to ask, let me see, there's a question about that percentage of giving that we recommend as a way to calculate what people can give toward their church. Sandra Glissick says, just to go back to the percentage of giving, how is percentage giving different than setting dues or a minimum? Is it not just another version of the minimum or the dues? In your research, have you found anything that shows whether percentage giving has a positive or negative impact on stewardship? I'll turn that over to the group, and whoever wants to take that can. I just want to be clear, we are not recommending a particular percentage of giving. I mean, somebody who wants to give a higher percentage of their income may do that. I think we are setting the ideal for as a percentage of one's income because what that does is it forces you to sit and intentionally think about what you will give every year or for that year to your church without, before you do anything else, you're looking at that. And so we are not by any means saying as a Metropolis that we think it should be a 5% minimum of your annual income, but that would be something that a family or an individual would prayerfully consider on their own. But I don't know if anyone from the committee here has seen any research that shows that percentage of income giving has any positive or negative impact on stewardship. Anyone want to take that? Or do you want to leave it for the...
I cannot cite chapter and verse, but yes, I have seen references to studies that show that percentage of income giving does increase. It's along the same lines as the pushback, skepticism that we had at two parishes that we were involved in when we switched from dues. The immediate reaction was, well, people, if we say they have to give $500, they'll give it. If we say it's whatever they want, they'll reduce it. People don't reduce the amount they give. They will either remain the same and slowly increase, or they will increase dramatically. That is my experience. And another piece of it is that when you we sometimes don't think about this, when you set a specific amount, that guarantees that the people who can pay that amount will. That's all they'll pay. And it's too high for some people, so they pay nothing. They don't become stewards. That is one of the barriers to stewardship. You set a level that is mandatory. Some people just aren't going to be able to do it or are offended by that. People do give when given the freedom to give.
Thank you, Owen. One last question from Juan Lara, who asks, is it a good idea to make public the list of stewards of a parish, for example, in Facebook bulletins, etc.? Is it good to list your stewards actually? And I'll go a step further and ask myself, is it a good idea to also publish the levels of giving of people? So I'll add that second part of it, because I think many parishes have a kind of directory of their stewards. But do you think that, number one, should there be a directory or a list of stewards? And as Juan Lara asks, and I added, do you think it's a good idea to list either people under particular kind of levels of giving, or even state the individual gift annually that a person or family gives?
And I can certainly take that.
Okay.
So I'll answer the second question first. And that answer, in terms of what anybody gives, should be confidential. It's between them and the parish priest, or whoever it is that, it doesn't have to be the parish priest, whoever, is for accounting purposes. But it's confidential, and it should not be a competition. And it should not be something about, oh, see how much so-and-so gave and see how much somebody else gave. So our recommendation would be that, you do not list amounts next to people's names or categories. With regard to publishing names, that's one way of recognizing. So if you list the names on a board that you have at church, it's one way of recognizing. Right now with COVID, if you have an announcement, it's another way of saying thank you in your bulletin, where you thank people and you thank them for their stewardship giving and the like. So, however, in terms of publishing names on Facebook, this is just from a very personal point of view. I think unless we have somebody's permission to do that, I don't believe that it is appropriate to be publishing people's names unless we ask for permission. And I don't really see the value personally of that. Although on the Sunday bulletin or, constant contact, whatever the case may be that people are publicizing, it's another way of keeping the community together, especially now with COVID.
The biggest, Your Eminence, excuse me, the biggest issue is you have to make sure if any list like this goes out that it's 100% correct, because at the end of the day, you don't want a misposted stewardship donation that went in as just a general donation not to be counted, and then they would fall off that list. We had this discussion, and we used as an example Cranor Center for the Performing Arts at the University of Illinois. Will you go to any program that they would have? They give you a pamphlet that shows what the play or a concert that you're about to see performed, but it lists anyone who's given $100 or more, $500 or more, and it goes up to $25,000 or $50,000. And the funny thing is there is no issue with that because people are accustomed to that. With the church, I think it becomes much more personal, and the last thing I think we want to do is hurt anybody's feelings and, like Myra said, make this a competition, or where someone who doesn't have the means that another person might feel bad because they're not at that level. And we know that there are some parishes that actually categorize different levels of stewards with different titles, and I think we all feel that might be a slippery slope itself. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lou and Myra. We have just 2 comments, and I'll close with some words of thanks. Richard Kozlowski says, good idea to have a published list of stewards, which reminds people to make their offering or commitment, but definitely bad idea to list what anyone gives. So basically, if your name is not on it, it's a reminder, or it could also be a way to kind of call the office and say, hey, didn't you get my offering? It was meant to be used for stewardship. And, this way you don't have to deal with that during a general assembly meeting where someone is not technically on the stewardship list, and it becomes kind of, very, very difficult and sometimes very emotional for people to, prove that they made their offering. So if you have that list, regularly updated, it would either give people a reminder or opportunity to clarify any clerical discrepancy. And then Anthony Kroll says, a possible focus for an upcoming monthly meeting to consider: showcase on one parish uses financial reports, showcase on how one parish uses financial reports from PDS, what is analyzed, what data is reviewed, what actions are taken with the data. So maybe to consider that with our monthly meetings, showcase a parish, not maybe not looking at which parish, but looking at the data and how it could be used in the parish, and so forth. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We had approximately 80 participants tonight. Please do join our monthly meetings. The first one is scheduled for September 1st. I believe an invitation has been sent out already to the clergy, parish council presidents, and also the stewardship representative that was given to us by each parish. I want to thank the subcommittee chairs for all their hard work, and through them, all of the participants that have been working so hard over the past few months to provide us with a blueprint, especially during this COVID-19 period, how to jumpstart, how to invigorate, how to start maybe stewardship programs in our parishes. I want to encourage the parishes to work creatively, work collaboratively, and to know that the Metropolis is here to help you. We are prepared to try to help introduce resources into your parishes, to make connections for you, to be a way for you to get over that hump, whatever that is, in terms of your development of stewardship in your parish. So please don't hesitate to contact us at any time. The full deck of slides and resources will be made available to everyone very soon. Among the things that you'll see are sample letters, sample initiatives from different parishes. And again, just a heartfelt thank you to everyone for their hard work, for working together and walking together to Christ. Have a beautiful evening, and God bless you all.